The Peloponnesian War wasn't just a conflict. It was a world-shaking showdown between two ancient superpowers, Athens and Sparta. For nearly 30 years, these two city-states, once allies against the mighty Persian Empire, turned their spears on each other, dragging the entire Greek world into a brutal civil war. This is the story of how hubris, fear, and the clash of ideologies led to the downfall of an empire and reshaped history forever. So, how did we get here? After the Greco-Persian Wars, Athens was riding high. They formed a Delian League, an alliance of Greek city-states, supposedly to protect against future Persian threats. But Athens, with its unbeatable navy and overflowing treasury, quickly turned this league into its own personal empire. They demanded tribute, meddled in the affairs of their allies, and used the league's money to build magnificent structures like the Parthenon. They were the dominant sea power, a democracy that championed art, philosophy, and culture. They were rich, arrogant, and expanding. On the other side, you have Sparta. Sparta was everything Athens was not. It was a land-based military powerhouse, an oligarchy ruled by two kings and a council of elders. Spartan society was famously austere and disciplined, entirely focused on creating the perfect soldiers. They led their own alliance, the Peloponnesian League, which was wary of Athens' growing power. The Spartans and their allies saw Athens as a tyrannical bully, a threat to their traditional way of life. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a Xiphos sword. The spark that lit the powder keg came from a series of smaller conflicts. When Corinth, a key Spartan ally, got into a squabble with its colony Corcyra, Athens decided to step in and back Corcyra. This was a direct poke in the eye to Corinth and, by extension, Sparta. Then, Athens placed a trade embargo on Megara, another Spartan ally, crippling their economy. For Sparta and its league, this was the last straw. They issued an ultimatum to Athens: lift the embargo and free the Greek states, or face war. Pericles, the influential leader of Athens, convinced his people to refuse. He had a strategy. He knew Athens couldn't beat the Spartan army on land. So, his plan was simple: bring everyone from the surrounding countryside inside the city's famous long walls, which connected Athens to its port, Piraeus. Let the Spartans ravage the empty fields. Meanwhile, the Athenian navy would raid the Peloponnesian coast, cutting off Spartan supply lines and slowly bleeding them dry. It was a war of attrition. He believed Athens' vast wealth and naval supremacy would guarantee victory. So, in 431 BC, the war began. The first phase, often called the Archidamian War, followed Pericles' script. The Spartan army, led by King Archidamus, marched into Attica each year, burning farms and olive groves. The Athenians watched from their walls, frustrated but holding firm. Their navy, just as planned, dominated the seas, winning skirmishes and securing their grain supply from the Black Sea. It looked like a stalemate, but then, disaster struck, and it wasn't a Spartan spear. In the second year of the war, a devastating plague broke out in the overcrowded city of Athens. It was a horrific epidemic, killing an estimated one-third of the population, including soldiers, civilians, and their great leader Pericles. The plague shattered Athenian morale and weakened its manpower. Thucydides, the historian who wrote the definitive account of the war, and an eyewitness to these events, survived the plague and described its terrifying effects on the city's social fabric. Law and order broke down as people lived for the moment, expecting to die the next day. Despite this catastrophe, the war dragged on. After Pericles' death, new more aggressive leaders, or demagogues, rose in Athens. Men like Cleon were less cautious and pushed for more decisive victories. This led to some surprising Athenian successes, like the capture of 120 elite Spartan soldiers at Pylos. This was a huge shock. Spartans were supposed to fight to the death, never surrender. This victory gave Athens a massive bargaining chip. After 10 years of brutal, indecisive fighting, both sides were exhausted. In 421 BC, they signed the Peace of Nicias, a treaty meant to last for 50 years. But it was a fragile peace, built on mistrust. Neither side fully adhered to the terms, and their allies continued to bicker and fight. The war never really stopped. It just entered a cold phase. This brings us to the war's most infamous chapter, the Sicilian expedition. The charismatic but reckless Athenian general Alcibiades, a former student of Socrates, proposed a bold and ambitious plan. Athens would send a massive naval fleet to conquer the wealthy city of Syracuse in Sicily. The goal? To gain immense resources, cut off Sparta's grain supply, and secure a decisive advantage in the war. The Athenian assembly, caught up in the excitement and promises of glory, approved the expedition. It was an unmitigated disaster. Just before the fleet sailed, a religious scandal erupted in Athens, and Alcibiades was implicated. Fearing for his life, he defected to Sparta. He advised the Spartans on exactly how to defeat his own city. He told them to send a top general to Syracuse to help them organize their defense, and crucially, to occupy a permanent fort in Attica, at a place called Declium. This meant the Spartans could now raid Athenian territory year-round, not just during the summer campaign season. In Sicily, the Athenian expedition was plagued by poor leadership, indecision, and a surprisingly resilient Syracusan defense, now bolstered by Spartan aid. After a series of defeats on both land and sea, the entire Athenian force was cornered. Thousands were killed, and the survivors were captured and left to die in the horrifying conditions of the stone quarries of Syracuse. It was one of the greatest military catastrophes in ancient history. Athens lost 200 ships and tens of thousands of its best soldiers. Their treasury was drained, and their spirit was broken. The end was now in sight. Smelling blood in the water, Sparta, with financial backing from its old enemy Persia, built up a navy to challenge Athens on its own turf, the sea. The final phase of the war was a series of naval battles in the Aegean. Athens, fighting for its very survival, managed to scrape together new fleets and even won some surprising victories. But they were on their last legs. The final blow came in 405 BC at the Battle of Ego. The Spartan admiral Lysander caught the Athenian fleet completely off guard, pulled up on a beach. He captured or destroyed almost the entire fleet without a real fight. With its navy gone, Athens was helpless. Its lifeline, the grain supply from the Black Sea, was cut. Lysander sailed to Piraeus and blockaded the city. Starving and with no hope of relief, Athens surrendered in 404 BC. The terms were harsh. The long walls were torn down, the empire was dissolved. The remaining ships were surrendered, and Athens was forced to become a Spartan ally, ruled by a brutal oligarchy known as the 30 Tyrants. The Peloponnesian War was a tragedy for all of Greece. It left Athens broken and Sparta victorious, but the victory was hollow. The constant warfare had weakened all the Greek city-states, leaving them vulnerable. A few decades later, a new power would rise from the north, Macedonia, led by Philip II and his son, Alexander the Great. They would come to dominate a fractured and exhausted Greece, ending the era of the independent city-state for good. The story of the Peloponnesian War is a timeless lesson about the dangers of ambition, the fragility of democracy, and how easily allies can become the bitterest of enemies. It's a conflict that, in many ways, defined the ancient world, and whose echoes can still be heard today. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into ancient history fascinating, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the past. See you next time.